This is from Media Matters for America, a guide to Project 2025, the extreme right-wing agenda for the next Republican administration. Project 2025 aims to roll back civil rights and destroy this federal government, among other proposals.
Make America great again.
Project 2025, a comprehensive transition plan organized by right-wing think tank, the Heritage Foundation, to guide the next GOP presidential administration, is the conservative movement's most robust policy and staffing proposal for the potential second Trump White House, and its extreme agenda represents a threat to democracy, civil rights, the climate, and more. Project 2025 focuses on packing the next GOP administration with extreme loyalists, former President Donald Trump.
Former president and currently convicted felon.
The plan aims to reinstate Schedule F, a Trump-era executive order that makes federal employees fireable at will, stripping tens of thousands of employees of civil service protections. Both Trump and others in the conservative movement have said they will clear out the federal government if he is reelected. The project has even set up online trainings and loyalty tests to narrow down potential hires to those who will commit to follow Trump without question. As Project 2025 senior advisor John McKenty has said, the number one thing you're looking for is people that are aligned with the agenda.
That's scary, too.
The Heritage Foundation's nearly 900-page policy book, titled Mandate for Leadership, A Conservative Promise, describes Project 2025's priorities and how they would be implemented, broken down by departments in the federal bureaucracy and organized around 4 pillars that will collectively pave the way for an effective conservative administration: a policy agenda, personnel, training, 180-day playbook. Written primarily by former Trump officials and conservative commentators connected to the Heritage Foundation, these proposals would severely inhibit the federal government's protections around reproductive rights, LGBTQ, civil rights, climate change efforts, and immigration. So basically, a Handmaid's Tale. Project 2025's goals for staffing the next GOP presidency reflect Trump's idea to gut civil service staff and replace them with potentially tens of thousands of MAGA loyalists. The New York Times describes this plot for a second Trump administration as an expansion of presidential power over the machinery of government that would reshape the structure of the executive branch to concentrate far greater authority directly into his hands. This is fascism. Project 2025 has created a training academy for potential employees for the next administration, which provides aspiring appointees with the insight, background knowledge, and expertise in governance to immediately begin rolling back destructive policy and advancing conservative ideas in the federal government. Project 2025 makes it clear the Department of Justice is not independent from the executive branch and implies the agency will be used to take legal retribution against whoever Trump decides to investigate. Project 2025 director Paul Dans recently appeared on Steve Bannon's War Room and encouraged viewers of the far-right broadcast to send in their resumes and participate in Project 2025's trainings in an effort to recruit extreme loyalists to the next GOP administration. Project 2025 aims to put Christianity at the center of American government and society by turning a biblical worldview into federal law, often employing Christian nationalist talking points and narratives to support its right-wing proposals. Vaught's Center for Renewing America, headed by one of Project 2025's top advisors, reportedly listed Christian nationalism as one of the major priorities for his second Trump term.
I'm pretty sure Christianity doesn't allow for you to fuck porn stars while you're married. Practice what you fucking preach, you orange piece of shit.
In discussing plans for the well-being of the American family, Project 2025 claims that centralized government subverts families by working to replace people's natural loves and loyalties with unnatural ones, utilizing the biblical language of natural versus the unnatural. Project 2025 attacks the nauseous tenets or gender ideology and similarly argues these theories poison our children, who are being taught to deny the very creatureliness that inheres in being human and consists in accepting the giveness of our nature as men or women. In the chapter on the Department of Health and Human Services, former Trump HHS official Roger Severino advocates for a future conservative executive to maintain a biblically based, social science reinforced definition of marriage and family.
I'm sorry, you can't pick Trump for that. He is not biblically based. He fucks porn stars while he's married. How are you gonna say
They
that?
don't give a fuck, dude. They don't give a fuck. What is the expression? Put lipstick on a pony and call it your wife or something? What? What is it?
I have no idea.
You can put lipstick on a donkey, but it's still an ass.
You can polish a turd, but it's still shit.
All right.
I've heard that.
While arguing that families comprised of a married mother, father, and their children are the foundation of a well-ordered nation and healthy society. Former Trump official Jonathan Berry's chapter on the Department of Labor states that the Judeo-Christian tradition, stretching back to Genesis, has always recognized fruitful work as integral to human dignity as service to God, neighbor, and family, and claims that Biden's administration is hostile to people of faith. Project 2025 aims for the next conservative administration to attack reproductive rights from several angles, including by removing the term abortion from all federal laws and regulation, reversing abortion pill approval, punishing providers by withdrawing federal health funding, and restricting clinics that provide contraception and STD testing.
Seriously? STD testing? You're...
Project 2025 suggests the next conservative administration strike any mention of abortion from government laws, policies, and regulations. In the foreword of the Project 2025 policy book, Heritage President Kevin Roberts writes that a pro-life administration starts by removing the terms abortion, reproductive health, and reproductive rights, among others, out of every federal rule, agency, regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists.
And why do you have any saying over my reproductive rights when you don't even have the same fucking junk that I do? Don't make decisions about my equipment. If you don't have a vajay, don't make decisions about my vajay. If you don't have tits, don't make decisions about my tits. If you ain't got it, don't talk about it.
I have tits though.
You don't have tits. You know, it just... you're gonna remove the words reproductive rights.
That's fucked. Yeah, that part got me. Project 2025 would have the next GOP administration restructure Medicaid to avoid providing reproductive health care and penalize providers who do. The policy book instructs the Department of Health and Human Services to issue guidance re-emphasizing that states are free to defund Planned Parenthood in their state Medicare plans and propose rulemaking to interpret the Medicare statute to disqualify providers for elective abortion. Project 2025 also suggests restoring Trump-era religious and moral exemptions to the contraceptive mandate through the Affordable Care Act that would allow employers to deny coverage. The policy book also proposes requiring education on fertility awareness-based methods of contraception and family planning and suggests eliminating condoms from health resources and service administration guidelines because they are not a women's preventative service. They kind of are, aren't they?
Women from getting pregnant.
I don't know.
Why are you trying to force people to have babies? I'm telling you, they're realizing that our generation is not having kids, and they're afraid that they are not going to have the worker bees that they had to produce and make money continuing for their fucking children.
The policy book directs the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to eliminate any programs or projects that are deemed pro-abortion. In a report detailing Project 2025's proposed crackdown on reproductive and LGBTQ rights, the New Republic writes that Heritage recommends the next conservative administration direct the CDC to eliminate programs and projects that do not respect human life and conscious rights and that undermine family formation. This includes ensuring the CDC is not promoting abortion as a healthcare and instead pivots to a research agenda that supports pro-life policies and explores the harms, both mental and physical, that abortion has wrought on women and girls. Do we care about the trauma of not being able to feed that child?
But what about a child being pregnant? A child whose body is not ready when I was pregnant. Ages. This isn't making America great for who? It's not great for me. It's not great for my girls. Because you know what? They're still going to let their whores, their side pieces, while they're married, you know, religion and all. You want to force it down our throats, but you can't even practice half of what you fucking preach.
Abortions always occur, but it's in our power to make it safe and to make it a part of healthcare.
It's because I'm telling you, I really do think it is because they are afraid of losing the working class. I think that they're afraid that there's not going to be enough slaves to produce for their children. Are we making it legal for men to be castrated if they're stepping out on their families? Because that doesn't go with your little fucking marriage shit. Are we gonna do that? It's disgusting.
Heritage directs the administration to roll back Biden-era policies that allowed abortion access in some circumstances at VA hospitals. In this chapter on the Department of Defense, the book recommends reversing policies that allow the use of public monies to facilitate abortion for service members. The policy book subtly promotes anti-surrogacy positions, writing that all children have a right to be raised by the men and women who conceive them. The policy book will reverse a Biden administration policy that requires hospitals to offer abortion in medical emergencies regardless of state bans.
Surrogacies, that's the people that get pregnant because the woman can't get pregnant because maybe she has something wrong.
Yeah,
or
but
he's got something wrong.
It's God's will that doesn't have children.
Oh.
Actually, this is more crazy. It requires hospital to offer abortions in medical emergency regardless of state bans. That's crazy, because that means no, you just die now. Project 2025 aims to end all fetal cell research and ensure that abortion and embryo destructive related research become both fully obsolete and ethically unthinkable. In the eyes of pro-Trump Republicans and their right-wing media allies, the Department of Justice and the FBI have long been corrupted by left-wing ideology and the bureaucratic deep state. Now, Project 2025 seeks to radically reshape federal law enforcement for the benefit of a conservative strongman. Its chapter by former Trump DOJ official Gene Hamilton states that anything other than a top-to-bottom overhaul will only further erode the trust of significant portions of the American people and harm the very fabric that holds together our constitutional republic. Project 2025 claims that the DOJ has become a bloated bureaucracy with a critical core of personnel who are infatuated with the perpetuation of a radical liberal agenda and the defeat of perceived political enemies. Jesus fuck. Citing the FBI's handling of the Russian hoax of 2016, big tech collusion, and the suppression of Hunter Biden's laptop in 2020, Project 2025 calls for a future GOP administration to immediately review all FBI investigations and terminate any that are unlawful or contrary to the national interest.
Project 2025 calls for initiating legal action against progressive prosecutors, citing local government officials who supposedly deny American citizens the equal protection of the laws by refusing to prosecute criminal offenses in their jurisdictions. Project 2025 proposes the next conservative president should enforce the death penalty where appropriate and applicable. Project 2025 claims that Biden administration has enshrined affirmative discrimination in all aspects of its operations under the guise of equity and vows to reverse this trend by attacking so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI for short. DEI offices have become the vehicles for this unlawful discrimination. So it's just they don't understand what it means, so
they don't understand it, so fuck it. So like they just boogeyman.
Project 2025 calls to reassign election-related offenses to the criminal division of the DOJ rather than the civil rights division, claiming otherwise voter registration fraud and unlawful ballot correction will remain federal election offenses that are never appropriately investigated and prosecuted. This is still about him crying about losing the election, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
This change would allow a second Trump administration to provide more resources for investigations into bogus claims of voter fraud and bolster efforts to overturn future election results. So it's a fucking dictatorship. Project 2025 takes extreme positions against LGBTQ rights, seeking to eliminate federal protections for queer people and pursue research into conversion pursue research into conversion therapies in order to encourage gender and sexuality conformity. The policy book also lays out plans to criminalize being transgender and prohibit federal programs from supporting queer people through various policies. Project 2025 calls for the next Secretary of Health and Human Services to immediately put an end to the department's foray into woke transgender activism, which includes removing terms related to gender and sexual identity from every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. The Trump administration proposed a similar idea in 2018 that would have resulted in trans people losing protections under anti-discrimination laws. The policy book calls for HHS to stop all research related to gender identity unless the purpose is conformity to one's sex assigned at birth. The New Republic explains that is research on gender non-conforming children and teenagers should be funded by the government, but only for the purpose of studying what will make them conform, such as denying them gender-affirming care, and instead trying to change their identities through counseling, which is a form of conversion therapy. The policy book's foreword by Kevin Roberts describes the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children as pornography that should be outlawed, adding the people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. Roberts also says that educators and public librarians who purvey it should be classed as registered sex offenders, and telecommunications and technology firms that facilitate its spread should be shuttered. I bet he's gay. Roberts' foreword states that allowing parents or physicians to reassign the sex of a minor is child abuse and must end. It doesn't happen. Echoing ongoing right-wing attacks on trans athletes, Roberts also claims bureaucrats of the Department of Justice force school districts to undermine girls' sports and parents' rights to satisfy transgender extremists. I mean, he loves trans people. I bet he's going to be one of those people that gets caught sucking off a tranny. You know what I mean? Which is fine. If you want to suck off a tranny, suck off a tranny. Just stop trying to take their rights. Project 2025 plans to use the Department of Justice to crack down on states that do not charge LGBTQ plus people and their allies with crimes under the pretense that they are breaking federal and state laws against exposing minors to pornography. So what about adult LGBTQ plus people and adult LGBT plus people? Is it still considered minors in pornography? Like, what if it's just like an adult gay person than an adult gay person? Would they
They're
still
breaking
be,
federal law.
Would they still be breaking federal law?
I don't know. It just basically says they're breaking the law by being LGBTQ, I think. Because it says under the pretense that they're breaking the law, so they're...
And against, yeah.
It's confusing if you think about it.
Project 2025 also calls for the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services to repeat its 2016 decision CMS could not issue a National Coverage Determination, or NCD, regarding gender reassignment surgery for Medicare beneficiaries. The policy book's HHS chapter continues. In doing so, CMS should acknowledge the growing body of evidence that such interventions are dangerous and acknowledge that there is insufficient scientific evidence to support such coverage in state plans. Going further, Project 2025 also demands that the next GOP administration reverse policies that allow transgender individuals to serve in the military. The policy book's chapter on the Defense Department claims gender dysphoria is incompatible with the demands of military service and the use of public monies for transgender surgeries.
Project 2025 would eliminate environmental protections and further delay climate action. In the foreword, Heritage President Kevin Roberts calls environmentalism a pseudo-religion, claiming environmental extremism is decidedly anti-human because it promotes population control and economic aggression by regarding human activity itself as fundamentally a threat to be sacrificed to the God of nature.
Are you fucking serious? Dude, they're the ones that's trying to force their religions.
Yeah, talk about forcing someone else's God down your throat.
Like, how dare you guys?
The Department of Energy chapter in the policy book, written by the former Federal Energy Regulatory Commission head Bernard McNamee, calls for eliminating 3 agency offices that are crucial for the energy transition and reducing funding to different agencies related to renewable energy. An entire chapter dedicated to the Environmental Protection Agency, written by former Trump EPA Chief of Staff Mandy, gonna not pronounce your name right, calls for shrinking the agency by firing new hires and eliminating the Environmental Justice Department.
They really do just want us all to die.
Project 2025 proposes to severely roll back both legal and unauthorized immigration through a number of untested, novel approaches that extend far beyond the policies of Trump's first term. The plan would potentially make hundreds of thousands of people vulnerable to deportation through the loss of temporary protected status and could ensnare families, those they live with, and other members of their communities.
Dude, this is fun. We're all immigrants.
Project 2025 aims to severely restrict legal immigration to the United States by dismantling the DREAM Act and restricting the DACA program, limiting temporary work visas from countries not on the current eligibility list, and increasing processing and application fees for migrants.
In other words, if you're not from Israel, then we don't want you here. Is that what I'm getting?
In a nice country like Norway.
The eligibility list, I bet you. There are very few countries on that list.
The policy book also suggests restricting T visas, which are temporary visas for certain victims of human trafficking, and U visas, which are given to victims that occur in the U.S. Project 2025 suggests adding a citizenship question to the national census, something that the Trump administration attempted in 2019, but which was blocked by the Supreme Court. As NPR noted, the plan also calls for aligning the mission of the government agency in charge of the next tally of the country's residents with conservative principles. Even people who are simply adjacent to unauthorized immigrants could be punished. Project 2025 would bar U.S. citizens from qualifying for federal housing subsidies if they live with anyone who is not a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident. Under Project 2025, the next Republican administration would also strip hundreds of thousands of individuals, many of whom have been in the U.S. for decades, of their legal protections by repealing all temporary protected status designations. The Niskanen Center writes, nearly 700,000 individuals would lose legal protections and work authorization by repealing all active TPS designations. Project 2025's proposal for Americans' education system would be one of the most extreme plans yet, calling for the elimination of the Department of Education, getting rid of all teachers' unions, and tearing down regulations on education spending. The first sentence of Project 2025's chapter on the Department of Education simply states, federal education policy should be limited, and ultimately, the federal Department of Education should be eliminated. Project 2025 seeks to eliminate the National Education Association's congressional charter, which allows for the existence of teachers' unions, calling it a demonstrably radical special interest group that overwhelmingly supports left-of-center policies and policymakers. The policy also aims at eliminating any policies implemented under the Obama administration that support diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, or so-called critical race theory, arguing that CRT specifically disrupts the values that hold communities together, such as equality under the law and colorblindness. Project 2025's mandate for leadership advises the next administration to rid federal rules and legislation of the term diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI.
The mandate also outlines the ways in which DEI efforts supposedly undermine the purpose of several federal agencies, ignoring the tangible benefits of a diverse workforce in the government. In the foreword to the mandate for leadership, Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts calls for the deletion of DEI out of every federal rule, agency, regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. He states the next conservative president must make the institutions of American civil society hard targets for woke culture warriors. This starts with deleting the terms used to deprive Americans of the First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, agency, regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. Oh my God, I've said that 4 times. Project 2025 calls for investigating and prosecuting discrimination perpetuated by so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI offices. The Heritage Foundation policy book argues that the DOJ's Civil Rights Division should spend its first year under the next administration using full force of federal resources to investigate and prosecute all state and local governments, institutions of higher education, corporations, and any other private employers who are engaged in discrimination in violation of constitutional and legal requirements. According to the mandate, the U.S. Army's focus on DEI is a detriment to its core warfighting mission. The manual also argues that the Higher Education Act of 1965 should be amended so higher education accreditation agencies are not allowed to leverage their title gatekeeper role to mandate that education institutions adopt diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. Authors call for the next conservative administration to treat the participation of Treasury Department officials in any critical race theory or DEI initiative without objecting on constitutional or moral grounds as per se grounds for termination of employment. The plan outlines details on how to take affirmative steps to expose and eradicate the practice of critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI throughout the Treasury Department, including identifying every Treasury official who participated in DEI initiatives and interviewing him or her for the purpose of determining the scope and nature of these initiatives and ensure that such initiatives are completely ended. They also recommended eliminating official DEI rules and a related committee in the Treasury Department according to the mandate. Under the Biden administration, the Treasury Department has appointed a counselor for racial equity, established an adversity committee on racial equity, and created an office for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. All of these should be eliminated. This is American fascism, and the Dems are asleep at the wheel.
So here's a question. What are 3 policies you would automatically enshrine into the Constitution that, in your view, would have immediate and positive impacts that wouldn't immediately burn down the country? I guess like shitlib edition. So you go ahead and go first.
Okay. Well, first, I think I would set term limits for Congress so we can get rid of some of the forever politicians. And then I would pack the Supreme Court and make the weights of justice unbiased once more. And then lastly, I would create an agency dedicated to investigating, infiltrating, and subduing the rise of far-right terrorism in America. What about you? What are the 3 policies that you would enshrine?
Well, I'd make all election funding public, all campaign funding public. I would outlaw lobbying, and I would abolish the Electoral College in favor of a popular national vote, like one vote, one person will vote.